into the abyss looks back.
The abyss looks back with the eyes of the missing. It echoes the names of the murdered.
Lori Lee Farmer, Doris Denise Milner, and Michelle Heather Guse.
A crime that remains unsolved haunts families, investigators, and in 2 Oklahoma cases, prosecutors who tried to convict and lost.
I was asked the question, now are you going to go out and try to find the real person? And of course, you try to explain, well, based on what I know about the case, based on the evidence, they had the real person.
On this edition of State Line, a pair of puzzles that will likely never be solved. Puzzles with too many missing pieces. This is State Line, the OETA documentary series Inside Oklahoma.
They called me from headquarters early that morning and told me that the scouts up here had found a dead girl. And when I got here, to my surprise, there was to the one, there was 3, and it was a homicide.
2 of the girls were from Tulsa, and 1 of the girls was from Broken Arrow. And I think it sort of shocked the entire area, that 3 Girl Scouts could come out here for a peaceful encampment and be sexually murdered, and 2 found zippered up in their sleeping bags, and another one nude from the waist down, strangled.
These 3 were sharing a tent. One young lady named Farmer, one named Milner, and one named Guse. I can't remember their exact ages right now, but it seems to me like we're talking 8, 9, 10, something like that.
On June 13th, 1977, counselors at a Girl Scout camp in Locust Grove, Oklahoma, woke up to an unspeakable horror. 8-year-old Lori Farmer, 9-year-old Michelle Guse, and 10-year-old Denise Milner had been brutally murdered. It was a crime that sparked a blaze of anger, mistrust, and mystery. Who would do such a thing? Authorities would charge a local man, a Cherokee Indian who'd broken out of the county jail 4 years earlier. His name was Gene Leroy Hart.
He had a history of several felonies. He had involving rape and kidnapping. He was out on, he was in Mays County on post-conviction relief, sentencing relief, and that's why he was in Mays County. And he escaped from the jail there not once but twice. And then at the time of the Girl Scout murders, he'd been at large for more than 4 years.
It was probably the largest manhunt in the history of the state of Oklahoma, and that went on forever. There were all sorts of news reports about him being sighted at different places.
Hart knew his hometown terrain, and he had hundreds of relatives and friends who protected him. Because of this, Hart was able to evade authorities for 10 months.
Well, I think people that knew him and had been around him as a young man and boy knew that he was incapable of doing something like that.
I think they thought that the authorities had dealt him a bad hand, and it's about as simple as I can make it. I think they believed the authorities had dealt him a bad hand, and that he wasn't guilty of any or all of this.
Gene's the nicest guy you ever want to meet. Yeah, he's just one of those guys that was 99% put up deal for one thing. The last deal was damn sure put up deal.
And do you think Gene Leroy Hart killed those girls?
No, I do not.
Why not?
He wasn't that kind of a guy. You just had to know him to understand.
Hart may have been well liked, but it was his racial heritage that was a major asset in winning allies.
The Native American is huge. That factor is bigger, much bigger than any football factor. The fact that he was a Cherokee, and the fact that this area, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's very clannish.
I owe a great thanks to the Cherokee tribe and to Ross Swimmer, the chief of the Cherokees. Ross Swimmer said, "We want to be sure that Gene Leroy Hart gets a fair trial."
Garvin Isaacs, a Native American himself, will not say who asked him to represent Hart, but he took the case. It would be Isaacs' first murder trial, and he'd be up against a seasoned prosecutor from Tulsa County. Betty Fallis was appointed special prosecutor for the case against Gene Leroy Hart. He was welcomed to Mays County with bumper stickers that read, "Welcome to the heart of Gene Country."
You knew where people stood as you walked in the courthouse in the morning. On one side, out on the lawn, you'd see the people who were very upset with law enforcement, with the prosecution, the family, the Guses or the farmers, or Mrs. Milner and her mother coming in there. I mean, you know, you walked the gauntlet to go in there of all these, because there was a big crowd, no question about it. You know, it was not a very comfortable feeling. His mother's property was very, very close to the Girl Scout camp location, the Camp Scout location. And in this massive effort to uncover evidence, part of it would have involved items that were taken from the Girl Scout camp the same night as the homicides occurred. Some of these were found in a location called the Cellar Cave. And the Cellar Cave was attached to Gene Leroy Hart during that period of time as a hiding place while he had escaped through there was a witness who had put him there. But there was also physical evidence in the cave that not only tied him to the cave, the Cellar Cave as it was referred to, but also in that sense tied him to the items that had been taken during the same evening or night of these crimes. Additionally, there was a testimony concerning a hair. As I recall, the little Milner girl, her hands were taped with tape or duct tape, as I recall, and that a hair found embedded in the tape between the hands of the little girl matched in all characteristics Gene Leroy Hart's hair. Now, hair is not an absolute means of identification or accepted as an absolute means of identification, but when you take that along with other evidence, certainly it has probative value, and it did in this case, in my opinion.
They came with a lot of scientific evidence and a lot of claims, and all that was just, you know, the evidence that they presented at the trial was based upon science, a lot of it, and we were able to show that it was not reliable.
How so?
Blood, hair, saliva.
How are you able to show it?
Well, just two quick examples. One, there's a thumbprint on the flashlight, and it's not Hart's thumbprint. And then another piece of evidence was that there was a footprint in the blood in the tent, and the footprint was, I think, a 9.5, and Hart's feet were 11.5. So you can't change your fingerprints or shrink your feet. So, you know, those are scientific pieces of evidence that fly in the face of the allegation.
The prosecution's case was jeopardized because the evidence was complex, sometimes difficult to understand, and you had to absolutely believe that the authorities were telling you the truth about the evidence.
We felt like there was a lot of manufactured evidence, a lot of sloppiness in the whole procedure.
Leela Ramsey was one of 6 women who sat on the jury that heard Hart's case. She remembers testimony from an Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation agent that created grave doubts.
Larry Bowles was on the stand being interviewed. I mean, we was on he was talking to the jury, and Garvin Isaacs asked him, said, "Were any pictures taken the day over there when they arrested Gene Hart?" And he said, "No, not any." He said, "You didn't take any pictures?" And they said, "No." We're sitting here looking at 8 by 10 glossies of that very man posed like he'd bagged a big game. He lied to us.
Jurors returned a verdict of not guilty. It was vindication for Hart and his supporters, but Ramsey says the jury's verdict actually had little to do with clearing Hart.
I'm not saying he's not guilty, but I am saying that the evidence showed he was not one person done by themselves. We all 12 agreed on that there was enough evidence to show that it had been more than one person.
We spoke with one of the investigators who helped gather evidence in the Hart case about the allegations that evidence was planted. He vehemently told State Line he never saw anyone plant evidence, nor did he hear of a conspiracy among the 6 investigating agencies to frame Jean Leroy Hart. He said it is accusations like these that keep many involved in this investigation from speaking out publicly, including himself. The OSBI, the lead agency in this investigation, refuses to comment on this case because it is still considered open. However, the agency has never made another arrest.
I was asked the question, now are you going to go out and try to find the real person? And of course, you try to explain, well, based on what I know about the case, based on the evidence, they had the real person,
I don't believe any DNA testing was used for court purposes prior to 1987.
A decade after the trial, investigators still wanted answers about Hart. They hoped a new technique called DNA testing might help. 3 of the 5 tests run on material found at the scene matched Hart's DNA, but still, it was not enough to be conclusive.
If 3 came back and were a match, then so far you would have a match. But if 1 or 2 of those other locations did not match, then that would turn that match into an exclusion, because all you need is 1 location or 1 probe to differ for it to be an exclusion. If there was insufficient information on the other 2, that it was inconclusive or results couldn't be obtained for the other 2, then you would still have a match, but you may not have as highly discriminating of a match as you would if you had 5 locations.
DNA testing skills continued to evolve, and as recently as 2002, analysts tried again.
So I think there's been about 13 years between the first DNA effort and this one, and with 13 more years, apparently all the slides and exemplars are so degraded that they could not work with them and could not reach a conclusion or any findings one way or the other.
Whatever Jean Leroy Hart knew about the murders, he took to his grave. Hart died of a heart attack in a prison exercise yard just 2 months after his acquittal. Michel Guse's father called Hart's death divine justice. Hart's family and friends suspected foul play, so that even in death, Hart remains surrounded by controversy. The Girl Scout murders shrouded in mystery.
It will probably never be brought to an end because of people and their opinions and the way they think.
I'm afraid personally that type of person is still living in our community.
I would just hope we remember Lori Lee Farmer, Doris Denise Milner, and Michelle Heather Guse. I hope we remember those names.
Two young girls went to the state fair that afternoon together.